Y'all, we got to talk about a few things. There are reports today from a nurse, a whistleblower at a for-profit private prison, an ICE facility in Georgia, talking about forced sterilizations of migrant women detained in ICE detention. And there are so many things about this that are so alarming. Every time I think that the depths of our dystopia can't grow any worse, I find myself amazed at how the system finds another way to astound me. Forced sterilization has a long history. It is a racist history, and it is entirely unacceptable. This is eugenics, flat out and simple. Any number of people have claimed over the course of the last year and a half, since the Trump-Pelosi concentration camps were expanded, that they're not concentration camps, they're border camps. Oh, the term doesn't fit. The term fits. And this set of revelations makes inescapably clear how it fits. This is straight out of the Nazi playbook. And it is eugenics, plain and simple. These are human rights abuses acknowledged the world over. It is absolutely shameful that we are practicing these things here in the United States. For-profit prisons are bad enough in the first instance. And this set of facts demonstrates that ICE can't or hasn't or won't in any way respect human rights. And we can't be outsourcing to private companies these very dangerous opportunities to offend human rights. There's no reason that we're contracting that out to the private market. There are a couple other intersections here that I want to make sure we touch on. The first, is it's really important to hold our criminal president accountable and to recognize that the blame, unfortunately, is sadly bipartisan. It took a Democratic Speaker of the House to fund these camps. July 2019, Speaker Pelosi authorized $4.6 billion for the Trump-Pelosi concentration camps. That's not a partisan problem. That is a bipartisan problem. And that suggests a few things. One is that there is a common set of interests that we share across the body politic, whether it's DHS goon squads suppressing the First Amendment from Portland to Kenosha, or whether it's ICE and CBP concentration camps taking pages out of the Nazi playbook, using private prison facilities to violate human rights en masse. In both of those instances, we've seen Democrats writing the blank checks that this criminal administration continues to cash. Both parts of that dynamic are entirely unacceptable. We can't pretend that merely by removing Trump that we are doing the job. That's the first step. And we have to do more than that. And these are really, to me, alarming issues. My family did not move halfway around the world twice. In our generation, for us to watch whatever vestigial commitments we had to human rights slip through our fingers. And the reason I'm running for Congress, despite, the steepest climb in politics, is because this shit is unacceptable, y'all, period. I take it very seriously. I am an immigrant myself. I understand the vulnerability that these people are subjected to. Let's get into that. There's another point here, an intersection, that I think a lot of people miss. Many of the migrants, particularly along the southern border, are climate refugees. They are fleeing a drought across Central America that has been going on for years. We are witnessing in California, particularly in Oregon and Washington, along the entire West Coast, everyone is viscerally feeling in our lungs, if not our burned homes and our friends who are on the run. I've talked to half a dozen supporters this week who are literally on the run, out of their homes and fleeing fires up and down the West Coast. And so we here are tasting a piece of what people in other countries have long had to endure. And what we have done to these climate refugees, migrants who are fleeing drought, is force them to be sterilized in the land of the so-called free and the home of the brave that fought to establish the international human rights regime in the first place. It is so sad to me, the depths to which our country has fallen after establishing so proud once a legacy on these issues, however, frankly, inconsistent at every point. Maybe another point I want to get into here, and this is important. People are looking at, what do we do about this? And I want to get beyond outrage to dig into what we can do about this. For me, tactically, the next several weeks, I'm all in on the election. And to anybody else who sees opportunity in the electoral sphere to head off some of these pitfalls, I would invite you to do a couple things. One, join us on the phones or text banking, shahid.fyi/volunteer. We'd love to have you. Beyond that, I think everybody recognizes the propensity of this criminal president to violate the law and the likely possibility that the continuity of the republic will be called into question. And I want to give here now some thoughts on how we can guard the election beyond election day. The thing that we have, the one ring to rule them all in a democracy, is work stoppage. People versus capital is the overarching story of our species' history going back eons. And in a context of a democracy, if we can withhold our work and withhold our, not just labor, but also our exchange, if we not only work, but also don't try to buy things, that general strike turns the screws. It's the one thing that the establishment cannot work around. And the way we get there, while you're phone banking with us and text banking, I would just encourage you, if you don't already know them, meet your neighbors. Nothing really online with respect to a general strike matters. The most important thing you can do is meet your neighbors. Soup clubs, childcare networks, bicycle repair collectives. This is the meat and potatoes with respect to vegetarians. That's how we get there. It is absolutely building the capacity in your neighborhood for people to get by without needing to participate in the market, either to trade their labor or to trade their money for goods. When we can get by without needing to buy things or earn money to buy things, that is the point at which we can sustain a general strike. That is the point at which we can turn the screws on the establishment. That's the point at which we have an opportunity to make our democracy real. And at the moment, seeing concentration camps openly violating even our most basic human rights, it is time, y'all. We need to make this democracy real, and I fear that we might be called on to defend it. And I just want to invite everyone, at the same time that we're trying to replace the architect and the funder of the Trump-Pelosi concentration camps, I also want us to just guard the doors of our democracy and recognize the risk to our republic and be ready for it. Meet your neighbors if you haven't already. Find some way to support each other. I know the pandemic complicates that. This is a very challenging time in our nation's history. I'm not going to lie to you, but this is the moment when all of our generations that are here now, this is what we were made for. This is the moment where we test our mettle, and where the future will be very, very profoundly influenced by how we take action in the coming weeks. And I just invite everybody to dig deep, find community. In community and action, you can find antidotes to despair. If despair and nihilism is part of what you're being challenged by at the moment, I know you're not alone. Community and action are antidotes. And just want to thank everybody for joining me and tuning in. I might just scroll these comments and see if there's anything I can respond to particularly. Raymond asks the best way to volunteer with us from a different state. Anybody anywhere can volunteer with us. Feel free to sign up online, shahid.fyi/volunteer. And please feel free to share that link. It'll redirect to an Action Network forum, and we do daily trainings. We'd love to have you. And you really can make a very big difference in the coming weeks. Shout out to vegetarians. Yeah, well, I said the meat and potatoes, and I realized, I wasn't trying to use... I recently became acquainted, just as long as we're on this subject, it's very easy to use language that is loaded and carries connotations for some people. I've tried increasingly to turn my language when describing the institutional ignorance of some set of phenomena. I've been trying to lean into saying burying heads in the sand, because turning a blind eye and turning a deaf ear, I've recently been educated that's ableist language, and I frankly hadn't gripped it before. And I'm just trying to be conscious, of that. Yeah, Jonathan makes this point that no one can consent to hysterectomies in an ICE camp. Read the Intercept article. It is terrifying. Women are being lied to by medical providers, being told different stories about what their diagnoses are, being told different stories about what their procedures are going to be. This is not okay. It's like gross violations of even like baseline medical ethics. Human experimentation is part of the allegation. We've been doing that to detainees before. The Tuskegee experiment comes to mind. This is a long history in the United States, but it's not a history that we can accept, and we certainly don't want to replicate it. The idea that people are coming here to flee disasters where they're from, and they're hoping to find, like my family found, liberty and opportunity, and what they're finding is this. It is not okay. And I fear where this leads. This is not the end. This is just where we're at now. We see where we've come from. I think of policy very much as a vector, one that develops over time, and we see the vector and the direction in which it is moving. It is not yes, the current time slice is alarming, but don't pretend for a second that it stays here. This is, forced sterilization is I don't know what it's a gateway drug to, and I don't want to find out. I want to close the camps. I want to abolish ICE and CBP. I want to transfer all of the responsibilities of those agencies to other agencies. And I want to make sure that we are actually standing for the human rights principles that we espouse. It is absolutely critical, not just to preserve those human rights, but frankly, to preserve our own national security. Our national interest inheres in standing by principles that will draw the allegiance of people from around the world. That's exactly what we haven't done for the last 70 years. We've been trading on the reputations of the generation that won the Second World War for 70 years since, while sullying their legacy. I think they roll in their graves seeing what we've been reduced to, seeing the practices that we have embraced in this once proud country, these abuses that we're meeting on powerless people, just trying to find opportunities to survive. And honestly, it disgusts me. Michael, Travis, a couple people are saying, calling for a debate. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know this, Nancy Pelosi has never debated a challenger since 1987. Just think about how much the world has changed since 1987. The last time Nancy Pelosi debated someone, the internet did not exist. Nobody had cell phones. This was before the Clinton administration. This was before the first Bush administration. It's been that long. And I want to make clear, it's not an offense to me that she won't show up to debate. It's an offense to San Francisco and the voters of the district and our democracy. The entitlement of an incumbent who ducks debates for an entire generation. A lot of things astound me. This is one of them. People might remember there was an appearance we had a chance to share online recently, Pelosi talking to Jake Tapper. I think this was about 6 months ago, not long after one of the coronavirus stimulus measures had passed the House. And he's pressing her on basically the abdication of working class interests in the stimulus measures and the mislaid priorities, tax breaks for millionaires before rent and mortgage relief. And Nancy Pelosi says, just calm down, just calm down. There's no point, she says, in evaluating what could have been. And that is the attitude of someone who refuses to debate and someone who thinks there's no point in debating. And I'm just, all I can say is appeal to the voters of the district and the media outlets of the district and the country that if anybody cares about democracy, let's give the voters of San Francisco an opportunity to see what their choices are. If we debate, there's no doubt in my mind that I will absolutely be the choice of this city to represent it in Washington. And the question is, will this city have the chance to hear the choices before it? That's ultimately up to media institutions and whether or not enough people hold the speaker accountable to what I think are baseline commitments for candidates for public office in a democracy. If you're running for office, show up to debate. You can't plausibly claim to be serving the public if you can't even show up to defend your ideas. That's not public service. That's public entitlement. Thanks, y'all. I'm seeing some really kind comments. I appreciate all of them. Yeah, certainly doing my best. I appreciate that. There's a question here from the Bella Graham about thoughts on children with disabilities in the school system. I want to touch on that and expand beyond it. Educational opportunities for everyone are important. So are post-educational opportunities. And there are, one of the issues for me that I've learned about recently is that under our current disability framework, if a person who is differently abled wants to get married, for instance, they basically don't enjoy the same marriage equality that I fought for LGBTQ couples to have 15 years ago and that they've gained since, but disabled people still don't have them. If you receive government benefits and you get married, you basically lose access to your benefits. And that's heinous. I don't think there's any basis for that. I think that's an easy way for us to better respect human rights and the rights of the disabled. I think creating the differently abled, I think creating opportunities for people, whatever their capacities to participate in society is really important. And I think a lot of people have opportunities to participate if they're supported more. And that's a thing that we can do. We have had at different points in our nation's history lots of socialized infrastructure. People, for instance, and this is a different question, I don't mean to conflate them, but just in another example of public infrastructure that's eroded, another one crisis here in San Francisco that a lot of people talk a lot about, it's inescapable, is the challenge that we have with homelessness. So many people have been kicked out of their homes. And I want to note two things here. One is so many people get kicked out of their homes because they run out of money paying for medical care. And I was talking to a physician at the University of California, San Francisco the other day who was talking about this being a frequent phenomenon among his patients. And the other thing to note here is the way that historically when Reagan particularly dismantled the institutions in which we had housed folks who had challenges with mental illness. That created a wave of preventable homelessness. We've modeled better alternatives in the past to which we can return, and we can innovate on them to do better going forward. And disability rights, as well as addressing homelessness in different dimensions, are I think both opportunities to do that. Just checking comments here. Yeah, Jonathan Energy 1. I think I need to permanently block any friends or family that vote for Trump again. I can't handle this. And I can't handle this either. And I want to, two thoughts here. One, your friends or family who might vote for Trump, absolutely make sure they hear from you about your concerns. Cutting people off, I think, is actually dangerous and that it might reinforce the problem. I frankly think your friends and family need to hear from you. If you cut them off, we, the movement, lose access to them. It can be really uncomfortable to have these conversations. It is absolutely necessary. And I just want to reiterate the opportunity. And I don't think we're going to bring anybody along, but people who are susceptible to the snake oil of right-wing populism need to be told how it is snake oil. Because one reason they're susceptible to it is because corporate Democrats don't meet their needs. It's very easy to fall for the allure of somebody offering you something when the other side says, yeah, everything's fine. There's nothing to see here. Move along while you're facing mass eviction and a pandemic and your entire state's on fire and you can't make it through 5 minutes without coughing out the lung. It's the delegitimation of the establishment reveals itself in increasingly stark relief with every passing day. And that fuels right-wing populism unless we have people offering real alternatives. This is why I want to replace Speaker Pelosi, so that instead of being offered the choice between predatorily, arbitrarily priced corporate health insurance on the one hand and whatever insane right-wing proposal that the GOP concocts next, people hear a choice between, okay, that insane GOP proposal and how about free medical care at the point of service without copays or deductibles? You can sleep at night and focus on getting better instead of worrying about how to pay for your care. If you need medicine, it will be free because it's a human right, not a commodity. It's not that complicated. It's already been acknowledged that way around the rest of the world. It will keep people in their homes. It will improve health outcomes. It will reduce costs. It will unleash a wave of jobs. So many reasons to accept a basic human right to health care, as the rest of the industrialized world did long ago. And I think not only is it important for all those policy reasons, but it's important to present those alternatives because that's how we diffuse right-wing populism. It's how we give an alternative to struggling people who gravitate to that populism because the establishment isn't meeting their needs. Anyway, that was just a comment to Jonathan. Somebody's, I don't know quite how to pronounce it, but mainstream media doesn't tell you all this. It's true. Mainstream media doesn't tell you any of this. If I say to a lot of folks, this is worth noting, I think you all must do this or you wouldn't be with me right now, being an active curator of your media consumption is really critical. It's like the first layer of engaged citizenship. And I just encourage folks to share independent news and investigative news with your network. Social media is an opportunity to do that. Those uncomfortable conversations with your family is an opportunity to do that. Shout out to the independent news outlets out there. Take advantage of them. They've certainly been very integral in our campaign to addressing this. Somebody asked if I'm completely altering the current prison and judicial system. I certainly hope to. We have a 20-point reform platform that I introduced in 2018, long before the latest uprising surrounding the murder of George Floyd. And in 2018, frankly, it was the most aggressive formulation in police reform that I'd seen anywhere in the country. I frankly think defunding creates, which I'm all for, creates some further opportunities in advance of it. I'm proud to have proposed ending qualified immunity in 2018. It's long before most people understood what it is or why it's so central to holding killer cops accountable. I'm proud to have proposed a whole bunch of things then, everything from ending cash bail, which is basically legal ransom, and yet another way that our criminal injustice system compounds existing inequities and preys on people. There are a whole bunch of reforms in it. I'd invite you to check it out. It's posted on Medium. If you Google Shahid criminal justice and medium.com, you'll find that. Jackson on Bigley asks, what can we do to stop this? And I just want to revisit my comments from before about a general strike. Absolutely vote for change. Do everything you can to support it. Phone bank with us for the next couple weeks. We need your help. It can make a big difference. And meet your neighbors. Find ways to work together so that you can all survive and maintain without needing to engage the market. Getting to a point where we can withhold our labor and withhold our capital, that is the key to being able to meaningfully influence the structure and not be forced to settle for rearranging the deck chairs on our sinking Titanic. So many comments here. I might leave it at that. I think we've been going for a little bit. I'll scroll to the bottom and see if any comments came in here while we were talking. Yeah, definitely shout out to vegetarians. I want to confess I'm not entirely on a plant-based diet, but I trend that way. I'm working hard on it. I do consume dairy fairly frequently, meat infrequently, but there's a point worth noting here. More people in the world could eat if everybody ate a little less meat. It's true. We squander a lot of our resources on a livestock industry that's profoundly inefficient in terms of the conversion of, photosynthesis into caloric content for people. Somebody, River and Spirit, says they're meeting with the OC district attorney down there in SoCal to address police brutality advice. Hell yeah. First of all, thank you for doing that work. Bunch of points of advice. A, if the particular concern is police brutality, one set of things to politicize and draw into public and try to legislate around are use of force restrictions. You can legislate policies to make very clear when and when can't police use certain tactics. Now, they're going to break them. Expect that. But the point is, once the policy's in place, you theoretically can hold them accountable for it. Theoretically. Now, police accountability obviously is something we are still questing for, but use of force policies present an opportunity at the community activism layer. Another thing you might check out is the wave around the country of progressive DAs. Look for a defense attorney, someone in your community who might have an activist bent and might be willing to challenge that DA in the next cycle. Here in San Francisco, we had we set a sort of national high watermark at the time. I'm confident it will continue to grow. But the election of Chesa Boudin as our city's district attorney a year ago was huge. And he's done a great deal of work since then in advancing profound criminal justice reform of the many different kinds, ending cash bail, decarcerating our city and county jail in the face of the pandemic, lots of ways to expand civil rights from the position of a DA inclined towards dismantling it and better respecting human rights. Good luck in that meeting. Somebody asks, this is Owen Massey, what do I think about the role of native burning practices in current wildfire? Let's say amelioration. I don't think we're going to exacerbate wildfires. Indigenous forest management techniques are well established in terms of their efficacy. They're not well established in terms of our replicating them. And this is one reason why I'm a big fan of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal includes, and let's tease this apart. This is worth spending a minute on. Occasionally you'll hear people say, oh, I like environmentalism. I'm all for climate change, but the Green New Deal has all this other stuff in it, so I can't support it. And these are people who maybe they see the federal jobs guarantee and they don't get why it matters, or they're worried about the just transition language. The reason that stuff's important, the Green New Deal is thoughtfully designed because it includes the solution to the political impediment that has prevented the environmental goals from moving forward. Historically, the reason we haven't been able to get stronger commitments to renewable energy is because there are very strong invested industrial interests, companies and workers, across a whole set of fossil fuel dependent industries. Unless we have a way for those people to off-ramp and move into some other line of work, the policy just won't pass. That's why the just transition is so important. Similarly, here, I'm going to talk less about the political valence and more in terms of how the policy hits the ground. The federal jobs guarantee is such an important part of the Green New Deal. Renewable energy is a part of it. That certainly matters. But the federal jobs guarantee matters too, not just for the industrial relations piece, but also because it can enable climate resiliency projects that the market cannot possibly mobilize the resources for, like specifically the replication of indigenous forest management techniques, labor-intensive work without any possibility of generating income for some profit-generating enterprise. So the market can't do it, but a federal jobs guarantee can. There is a generation of people who need work let's do it. Let's get to it. It's going to take us years. And if it keeps, hopefully, millions of people from choking on their breath in years going forward, that's work well worth doing. A point on the wildfires I think is also worth noting. It does seem to me a lot of people are talking about a lot of different dimensions of the wildfires, what they indicate, the long-running warnings about mounting global climate catastrophe, the air quality indices in many West Coast cities among the worst in the world. The point I want to make here is that by releasing as much carbon as we have in the millions of acres that have burned across California alone, we have frankly accelerated climate crisis. Any savings that our state has been able to secure by, for instance, legislating better emission standards over the last generations, it all literally just went up in smoke. And the climate chaos models haven't been adjusted yet to reflect how much carbon just got spewed into the atmosphere and is still going up. It's not just destroying the carbon sinks. It is actively accelerating the chaos. And I hesitate to linger on that too long because I don't want to reinforce the nihilism that a lot of people are feeling. I want to reinforce, if anything, the hope in community and action to respond to all this. But I do want to make very clear that this is no time to defer to the future, whatever action we might ever take. The chips are down. It is literally the future of our species on the line right now. And I just want to invite everybody to lean in. It's really important that we all meet our neighbors at a time like this. Thanks for the cheers. There's a question from Michael. Can we organize a caller raid on Speaker Pelosi's office to debate you? Sure, I'm up for it. I think it might be more effective, frankly, to just shame her online in comments on everything she posts. It does seem to me to reflect a great deal of entitlements, chutzpah, audacity to claim to serve the public. If you won't defend your ideas in front of it, feel free to make that point. I think if that becomes a loud enough and sufficiently widespread call, I think it will force her hand, frankly. And just to be clear, again, if she shows up for a debate, I'll be the next representative for San Francisco and Washington. Mahadas, advice for youngsters pursuing politics. The most important thing, actually, it takes back to the guidance for the general strike. Meet your neighbors. Put your ear to the ground. The essence of liberatory praxis is identifying your privileges and redeploying them in the service of the less fortunate. The key there is putting your ear to the ground to hear from people less fortunate how they need help, like what is helpful to them. The white savior complex is a thing. I've seen it demonstrated in lots of ways. Just show up is the point. If you want to get involved, show up. It's hard right now in the pandemic, but there are virtual equivalents. Learn what people are going through. Hear how they are taking action to address those issues and actively ask how you can help. That's the key. And that will unleash any number of things. It can point towards community organizing projects. It can point towards solidarity projects. It can point toward joining nonprofits and supporting local working communities. It can look like that really close to the ground community organizing work like we were referring to before. Lots of ways to be helpful to the movement. And the key is just find someone less fortunate and find a way to stand in active solidarity with them. And then your path will reveal itself, I think. Wow. Marina Nurse Boogie says in the 80s, they were sterilizing sex workers at the hospital that she works at currently without their consent. That is horrifying. And I wish I could pull you into the conversation somehow to tell us more about that. That is really not okay. I do want to just briefly note that the fact that it might have been happening within the United States doesn't make it any better that it's happening at the border, and I don't think that's Marina's point either. But we can't let these kinds of abuses be normalized in any context. Yeah, there's some discussion actually with Marina in the comments here. Thanks for folks picking up on that. Shout out to our international friends. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, why? Right. There's an exchange here about a couple of people. Pelosi needs to go. She's afraid to debate. Anyone wonder why? Why do they keep reelecting her then? The short answer to that is it's been a generation since there's been another Democrat on the ballot. Pelosi has had the opportunity to coast to reelection in every race that she's ever ran, frankly walked. She hasn't had to run because Democrats are the party here. And as the leader of the Democratic Party, she hasn't had to fear a challenge because we have a somewhat unique primary structure in California across the state. Instead of having separate party elections, we have a jungle primary, so all the parties and all the candidates run against each other, and I already beat all the Republicans, so I took second place to Pelosi. It's the first time any Democrats ever done that. So I think that's one reason why San Francisco has kept electing her, is that no one else has broken through. So I'm literally the first person poised in a generation to do it. And just to be perfectly honest with you, I can only do it with your support. So if you haven't joined us on the phones yet, or text banking, or if time is tight with a financial contribution, please consider that. Our average contribution is $21. We're supported by just short of 30,000 people around the country. We'd love to have you, and particularly on the phones as well. With the ballots arrive in just about 2.5 weeks, so we'd love to have you. Somebody asked if I would leave my corrupted Democrat Party. Just to be clear, I am running to knock the leader of it out in order to address that corruption. I recognize that the party is problematic, to say the least. Lots of people are down for a debate. I appreciate that. Ben makes the point that I'm more qualified than Pelosi. It's outrageous she won't debate you. I do want to make this reflection maybe explicit. Nancy Pelosi's central qualification to Congress when she went to the House in 1987 was that she was and remains a prolific Democratic Party fundraiser. I think that's part of the problem. When we select policymakers on the basis of how much corporate money they can raise, that's a good sign that when they get into Congress, they're going to be passing corporate policies, not community supporting policies. My qualification for Congress is that I've spent 20 years fighting the corporate establishment from the left. I fought them on gay rights to establish the right of my gay neighbors to form their own families. I fought them on immigrant rights under the Obama administration to try to stop biometric surveillance that has since then expanded and grown to encompass all Americans beyond immigrants. I fought them on peace and justice to try to stop our ham-fisted, belligerent, idiotic foreign policy. I fought them on domestic civil liberties to try to ensure that you maintain a right to dissent so that our democracy remains real instead of falling prey to arbitrary surveillance and arbitrary state violence and secrecy, the kind of stuff we've seen in Portland and Kenosha with the goon squads that Pelosi funded for Trump to abuse. Let's see what else. Damnation Daddy, you're really kind. I appreciate that. To make the point, I'm an immigrant, so I'm not eligible for the White House, nor am I interested in it. I'll be very grateful for the opportunity to serve in the House of Representatives. Somebody's asking about some things some people said about me. I would invite folks to check out Rolling Stone. I've had an opportunity to speak at some length about this. I don't want to necessarily distract here, but I will say that any allegations about how I treat anyone they matter to me. I treat people kindly and with respect because that matters to me. A whole bunch of folks with an interest in saying something else did say something else. And there's plenty of evidence out there to indicate what the facts are. And I would just, implore anybody interested to explore it. Plenty of people have. Rolling Stone has. The Humanist Report has. That's a particularly important interview to check out because they publish some very revealing texts that prove that the people who used to work for me, who have criticized me, at least knew that at one point a narrative they were spreading in public was false. And I think that's an important thing to consider as you're evaluating those claims. Cowboy Rights asks, what do I feel about people choosing to vote Green Party? To be clear, the way the Electoral College works, it doesn't frankly matter if you live in a safe blue state how many popular votes Joe Biden gets. I live in a safe blue state. I do not plan to vote for Joe Biden. It doesn't matter if I vote for Joe Biden. Nobody cares. It doesn't influence the outcome in one iota. But I am very eager to support a presidential candidate who aligns with my voice. There was one of them running for the Democratic nomination. He was far and away the nominee with vastly more support than any other, and the corporate Democratic Party decided they colluded to ensure that he not be the nominee. And that was a choice. And I am not going to be held hostage for my vote, period. If you live in a battleground state, I want to implore you to consider the alternative. It might make a great deal of sense for you to feel held hostage by this dynamic, but given the dynamic and given the reality of the Electoral College to people in battleground states, I do encourage votes for Joe Biden, recognizing the danger of this criminal administration remaining in office. Just to make the point explicit, even if we vote for Biden, I don't have a great deal of confidence that our election apparatus or that our country's norms are strong enough to ensure a peaceful transition in power, which is why, again, I encourage people to not just vote, prepare, be ready to engage in work stoppage. We might need that. Yeah. Yeah, check us out on the other platforms as well. Thanks. I am Lil Silver. We're also active on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Trying to line up some AMAs on Reddit. If any of you are part of any Reddit subreddits that might be interested in an AMA, please write to us at info@shahidforchange.us. We'd be eager to connect with your community. Thanks, Owen, for dropping the number to Pelosi's DC office. Her DC office, for anybody who wants the number, is 202-225-4965. Thank you, Ethan. You give me hope. So many people, I get so much love from folks, and I really appreciate this. I want to make this point really clear, too. I'm a schmo with a pen. I don't have any property. I don't have any power. All I have is a set of principles, and I will certainly stand by them all day. It's all I've got, which is just to say the reason I'm on the field right now, the reason I have this opportunity to replace Pelosi as San Francisco's voice in the House, it is entirely up to y'all. It's the donations, it's the time on the phone, it's the retweets, it's the comments, it's the shouting us out to your friends. That's how I got here. So as much as I so appreciate all the supportive comments, you all really do give me both hope and, frankly, opportunities. I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing right now if it weren't for you and your help. Right on. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate this. There's a comment of if I've ever tried to, with cameras, confront Pelosi. This is actually a poignant moment to reflect upon this. July 2019, it was the day after she approved the bill to fund the concentration camps. She showed up in San Francisco, which she rarely does, doing a fundraiser in the financial district. And I was outside with a crowd of people and a bunch of signs, as there were a bunch of well-heeled Democratic donors inside, hearing Nancy Pelosi. And I think they were raising money for some other Democratic candidates. And that's the closest I get, is protesting her appearances. I did have an opportunity to speak at the podium at the California State Democratic Party convention last year, due particularly to the invitation of a candidate for the state party chair, Mike Katz-LeCabe. Thank you so much again for that opportunity, Mike, if you're listening. That might be the closest I've gotten to the Pelosi's. I didn't meet Nancy that day, but I did meet her daughter, Christine, who a few months later was described in the New York Times having called Bernie Sanders to complain that actress Susan Sarandon had endorsed our campaign. And maybe just to tie together a few pieces of our conversation, if the Pelosi's are so concerned about me that they're getting talked about in the New York Times for complaining to Bernie Sanders about Susan Sarandon, a office holder in D.C. about an actress in L.A., I'm in San Francisco, so are they. Just show up for a debate. It's not that hard. Let's just do this like adults. It can be really easy. Queen of Sustainability, wish you could vote for me, but you live in Oakland. I hear that. Anybody in the East Bay, you can do things for us, like join us for, we're not doing it at the moment with the air quality like this, but we are doing socially distant outdoor outreach actions. We'd love to invite you for any of those. We have a sign delivery program, getting window signs to people who've pledged their support. We'd love to engage you on that. Phone banking is an opportunity, introducing our campaign to anybody you might know in San Francisco. Lots of ways to help, particularly for folks just across the Bay. So big shout out to the East Bay and love for Oakland. So many comments. River and Spirit asks again, best way to convince district attorneys to reform their practices. One is the street activism that we've seen. Another is the policy advocacy inside institutions, like around, for instance, use of force policies. And then the third is this electoral heat. Find a challenger. A lot of officials start showing up very differently when they have challengers. That's been true of Pelosi, actually. In fact, this is a perfect example. She's not a district attorney, but people remember the Justice in Policing Act that was named after George Floyd. And even though Nancy Pelosi got his name wrong at the press conference introducing the bill, this was when she knelt in kente cloth to introduce this measure. So let's talk about the Justice in Policing Act. I'm not a fan of it, particularly because it expands police budgets and police surveillance. So that's a reason alone to reject it. It does, however, include many thoughtful elements, frankly, that I've spent over a decade clamoring for, like data collection so that we can better assess the extent of potential profiling and to empirically establish it. At the moment, there isn't enough data collection for claims of profiling to be verified or not. That was proposed in legislation in 2001 and was never adopted. It's 2020, y'all. And I don't think a member of Congress who shows up in 2020 to embrace that reform can in any way be claiming to lead. That is literally a generation late. And I've been on that train since 2008. I've been advocating for that bill. And I've seen corporate Democrats, even the former chair of the House Judiciary Committee, renowned dean of the Congressional Black Caucus, says this was June, maybe July 2010 meeting, Obama had just gone to the White House. I'm in this meeting asking, when are you going to reintroduce the End Racial Profiling Act? He'd introduced it in the prior session, and his answer was, we are waiting for the administration's support, which never came. I'm not going to opine too long about that. But yes, put some heat under incumbents by challenging them. Another thing I would say here is that the Justice and Policing Act, in addition to the data collection provisions, it also included reforming qualified immunity. These are measures that Nancy Pelosi has never supported before in the 30 years she's been in Congress. But she supports them now, I think, due to a combination of street activism, which everyone is engaged in. Thank you to everyone who's been in the street, whether in the last month or in the last 6 months or frankly the last 20 years. Like, thank you for showing up. In addition to that activism, there's also all the policy advocacy that's happening in the institutional sphere in Congress and state legislatures. And then finally, I'm grateful to be an agent of electoral accountability. I think the fact that we are on the field as the first Democrat facing her in a November election ever that she has faced, I think we basically operate like a fulcrum. And the activism is like the force on the lever, and we can be a force multiplier for the social movements, compelling action by even intransigent incumbents who've declined to show their solidarity in the past. Okay. I'm starting to get hoarse, and I think I need to get a cup of tea. Air quality, right? Somebody asked about ranked choice voting. I do support ranked choice voting, and frankly, I'd like to go further than that. Proportional representation is a model I would ultimately like to seek. The ultimate goal to me there is to encourage multi-party democracy. The concentration and consolidation of influence in two political parties, it frankly has constitutional valence. I think it undermines democracy inherently. I don't want to chase that rabbit too long, but I will say, if that interests you, read the Federalist Papers, number 10, and it discusses the danger of faction, and the only way to address that is to welcome them all, and that's exactly what we don't do. We have a two-party system, which frankly doesn't follow the prescription that James Madison articulated quite neatly in that piece. Another way to put that is that political parties undermine the genius of our constitutional design by allowing coordination across branches and layers that are supposed to be intentionally separate. There's a lot more we could say there, but I don't want to, get too esoteric. One thing that we need to do to fight climate change, replace Nancy Pelosi in the House. Tangible things we can do right now to make the biggest difference given the COVID and air quality situation. I'd go back to meeting your neighbors. If there's anything that is important here, find some way to take action with your neighbors to make life mutually easier for the both of you. This is mutual aid, but mutual aid can aspire to more. Mutual aid can enable community resiliency to do things like not participate in the market. So meet your neighbors, find something to do together. Community gardening, making soup, taking care of each other's kids, organizing rides, I don't know, whatever it is, whatever fires you up, find some way to do it with your neighbors without it involving money. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for all the shout outs. Yeah, I think I am going to get a cup of tea. Well, okay, let's talk to, I'm not sure to say it's Picard, maybe. I'm going to read the comment first. You're losing me at defunding the police. We definitely need to demilitarize and reform and better fund and offer training, which costs more. Let's see where the rest of that comment goes. Maybe there's not more of it. The point here is, yes, we do need to defund police because the apparatus of predatory policing has revealed its failure over and over and over and over again. Every time we say their names, every name we say is a revelation and a confirmation that predatory policing does not keep us safe. It is the locus of harm in too many communities. Social workers can do what police can't. Disarmed people can do, what paramilitary people cannot. That is the point here. If we are sincerely interested in public safety, we have to reinvest in real alternatives to build that. Public safety is the goal. Policing ain't it. Oh, Sema's with us. What's up, sister? Good to see you here. Yeah, this is where I actually started the live stream talking about this. The eugenics at the camps. It is outrageous to me for anybody who joined us late. Straight out of the Nazi playbook. We cannot let this go on, y'all. The Trump-Pelosi concentration camps is a good place to, maybe we'll end here. Thank you, Sema, for directing the conversation here. The Trump-Pelosi concentration camps have to close. I was running against her before, but when she signed that deal, that was it for me. I mean, I am all in. I went to the border in San Diego to try to visit some of the detention camps and learn what's happening there. Shout out to the folks at Al Otro Lado. If you're looking for a group on the ground to try to stay connected to and learn from, check out their work online. They do fantastic work protecting the rights of migrants and U.S. human rights defenders. It is unacceptable. So many dimensions to this whole eugenics part. It's straight out of the Nazi playbook. It's being effectuated. The particular reports in The Intercept address a private prison facility, which is problematic in the first instance. And the fact that these kinds of harms are happening there just indicate all the more reasons we have to end private detention. No one should profit from jailing people. Just like no one should profit from weapons. There are a bunch of things that we shouldn't allow profit to incentivize, like plundering the earth for resources that don't belong to us. And lots of ways through policy to get there. Let's throw this on the table while we're at it. At the same time that I would like to close private detention centers, I would also like to nationalize a couple industries that are dependent on fossil fuels. There's no reason to incentivize resource plunder. It is absolutely senseless, recognizing what's happening to the climate. That's a thoughtful policy response to shift the incentives, to make sure that we're not ducking into predictable punches. Anyway, I'm losing my voice. I think I got to go. So appreciate everybody joining me right now and all of your thoughtful comments and all your support. I'm sure I'll be back soon. Join us online. If you haven't yet, remember to volunteer. Shahid.fyi/volunteer. Thanks for your support. Hope to see you in Congress soon. Peace, y'all.